Well, good morning. How y'all doing?
Oh man, they're sleeping,
Oh,
babe.
no.
Oh no.
Off to a rough start. Anyways, wanted to introduce myself and my wife. I am Matt Dooley. This is my beautiful wife, Jordan.
Hey guys.
Just want to thank you guys so much for having us today. We have really enjoyed our time in Abilene. We just had a blast.
Yeah, thank you guys for having us. To really start off, we want to give you a little background. Does anyone else find it more fun to listen to a story than to just be told information? Yeah, okay, cool. So we're going to just share a little bit of our story and how we got to really right to where we're standing today. So you want to kick us off?
Yeah, so to start with myself, I am from Scottsdale, Arizona originally. Born and raised there. I received a football scholarship to Indiana University to be a long snapper. Now, for those of you, like 90% of you who don't know what that is, basically I'm the most athletic guy on the team. Why are they laughing?
I don't know.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm kind of on the lower end of that spectrum. Anyways, I was the guy who would hike the ball to the punter on fourth down and then to the holder on field goals. Sounds boring, but it's something that IU came to me and they're like, hey, we'll pay for your school if you do this. So I was like, all right, game on.
And he was a stud at it. Don't let him fool you. My story is that I was born in Indiana, raised in Indiana, and went to Indiana University. So real exciting, I know.
Well, it did get exciting when we met.
Okay, that's true, yeah.
So the night we met, meeting Jordan, it was unlike any other woman that I had met. We sat, we talked for 4 hours. It was like catching up with an old friend.
Yeah, and I love when you say that. It's just so cute. Anyways, but it really was. I mean, we just connected on so many levels, and it was funny because it was a little bit of a spontaneous meeting, and so I had actually just gotten home from the gym, and I kid you not, I'm like shoving chocolate chips in my face when he comes over, and I'm like, hey. So the next day, I'm like, oh man, I sure hope like he didn't think that wasn't a good thing. Well, next day I was kind of expecting him to send me a text message and say it was nice to meet you or something. And the whole day went on and I didn't hear from him. And so I'm like, great,
because I had practice, I had meetings, I had class.
Like, and I'm being
my
a girl,
athletes
like,
can help
why
me out
isn't he
here.
texting
Like, you know what I'm
me?
talking about.
So didn't hear from him. Well, around 4:30 that day, I got a phone call. And he said, hey, I'd like to take you out. And I was like, I'm sure you guys at ACU aren't like this, but at IU, the guys didn't really call you and ask you to go on a date. So note to self, guys, do that.
It's okay. You can still use like the phone part of your phone.
Yeah. So he calls me, asks me if he can pick me up around 7, and we were going to go to the campus ministry meeting and then grab dinner. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. So he came to pick me up in his orange Honda Element, which...
Why are you laughing? It's a cool car. For those of you who don't know what it is, it's essentially a box with wheels.
Yeah.
So that's what I was rolling in all through
and
college.
And what was the nickname?
Oh, my teammates affectionately named it Charmander because it was orange.
So I got to meet Charmander that night and really, again, hit it off right away. We started our dating relationship, shortly after that, and I would get to wear his jersey to football games and thought I was pretty cool walking around campus with number 91. And over time, our relationship got more and more serious, and eventually he graduated and started to pursue professional football.
Yeah, so after graduation, I had an opportunity to attend the Pittsburgh Steelers rookie minicamp. And it actually fell on graduation weekend, so instead of sitting in 90-degree heat and waiting for someone to hand me a piece of paper, I was playing football. So I thought that was a pretty good trade-off. So I wasn't signed after that camp, and so I had talked with Jordan, I had talked with my family, and made the decision, like, hey, this is something I want to pursue. I think I have a shot at this. Mm-hmm. So I decided to move back home. Jordan still had a year of school left. But also at that time, I knew that Jordan was the woman I wanted to marry. I knew that from the night I met her. Took her a little bit longer to figure that out, but we're good now. So I decided to fly out to Indiana and surprise her. I had been in contact with her parents. I've got the best in-laws. So I went to ask for her dad's permission if I could have Jordan's hand in marriage. Old-fashioned, I know, but that's who we are. Mm-hmm. So initially, we go to sit down. He says, I'm just going to save you some time. No. I knew he was joking, but still, like a little part of me, like my heart just sank. So, no, he definitely approved, and so we went back to the house, and
So I was living with my parents that summer because it was the last summer before I went back to school for my senior year. And they had told me that we were going to dinner with some friends. And so I had gotten ready, and then my mom all of a sudden starts holding me hostage in the back room. She's like, can you help me with my makeup, and which dress should I wear? And is doing all of these things to stall so that I don't go out into the front of the house and see him pulling up, because he was supposed to be in Arizona. And so I don't hear the doorbell ring at all.
Yeah, so my plan was because kind of how we met is I walked over to her apartment, knocked on her door, and that's how we met the first night.
We lived really close by each other.
And so I had all planned out. I had the car parked out front. I was filming the whole thing, and I had walked up to the door thinking that because her dad had just gotten home, he had kind of like updated the rest of the family, like, hey, Matt's here, it's going down. So I walk up to the front door, hit the doorbell. I've got the ring ready, right? 2 minutes pass. Nothing. So I pull out my phone. I'm like texting her brother. I'm like, dude, I'm here. Like, I'm at the front door. So he texts her mom, and she tells.
So then my mom's like, oh, the doorbell rang. I'm like, no, it didn't.
They're like in the back room.
And she's like,
so
no, I'm positive that the doorbell rang. And I'm like, Mom, the doorbell didn't ring. She's like, go. And she's pushing me out the door.
So after several times of me standing up and getting back down on one knee, like waiting, 5 minutes later, she opens the door. My leg I've lost all circulation below my right knee.
I'm so sorry.
So pop the question. She says yes, obviously.
Yeah.
And, we're here today.
Yeah. So anyways, we were engaged for 14 months, which was kind of a long time.
Yeah, definitely. If you're thinking of getting engaged, try and keep that engagement as short as possible. Don't recommend the super long engagement.
So we were engaged for 14 months, and we ended up, we had this beautiful wedding on Labor Day weekend. We had to change our wedding date a few times because during our engagement, he was signed to the Steelers and actually played on the team for a while. And so that kind of created some need to change our wedding date. So we had 3 different wedding dates total. But we ended up getting married on Labor Day weekend, 2016.
Yeah, so we just celebrated our 2nd wedding anniversary. There we go, perfect.
You called that right. He literally wrote, pause for applause.
I was going to call you out if you didn't, because that's a big deal. Marriage is hard.
Yeah, seriously. But yeah, up until this point, the last 2 years, we've really been slowly learning what it looks like to really unify and how to learn to choose love. It's one thing to fall in love, but actually choosing love has been something that we've been slowly learning up until about 2 seconds ago. So
still learning.
Yes.
So the Bible says the two shall become one flesh. Mm-hmm. But I tell you what, it's a lifelong journey to become of one mind and one heart.
Right.
Because you're 2 individual people who have done things different ways your entire lives.
Yeah, like anybody. Like any relationship, marriage or not, we have differences. We have different habits. We come from different backgrounds. We have our different living tendencies, our strengths, our weaknesses, etc.
Yeah, so for example, Jordan is super organized, which is a lifesaver for me because I would lose my head if it wasn't attached. On the flip side, I am like a stickler for being on time. Being an athlete, I'm sure the athletes here can attest. Like if you're not 15 minutes early, you're late. Thanks, softball team. And Jordan, on the other hand, it's like if we're there within 20 minutes of the start time, like we're cool. But me, I'm like freaking out. I'm like, I just have like
he tells
flashbacks
me that
of
our
football.
dinner reservations are at 5:30 when they're at 6, just so that we get there by 6. So that's where we're at. So you're welcome that we're on time because you can thank this guy. So, no, but that said, there really are certain things that can create some tensions in a relationship, and it can be so easy to look at someone's life from an external lens and see 5% of their life on social media or one cute photo and think like, oh my gosh, they haven't made. But really, there's these certain things that really do create tendencies in our marriage, and one thing that we found is that sometimes what can happen is that can create a me versus you mentality, right? That can create a I'm right, you're wrong, and we forget that we're on the same team.
Yeah, so actually this past week we had a couple issues that we've kind of been sweeping under the rug, like, oh, we'll take care of this, it's fine. They kind of like reared their ugly head, if I'm being straightforward with you, and we were forced to address these issues head on. And, we had to kind of zoom out and look at it from 30,000 feet. and say, okay, what are we doing? Why are we doing it?
And really gain a healthier perspective. Really see it from the other's perspective was the first thing. But the second thing, so what we had been doing up to this point is we had recognized these issues and like the frustrations and the annoyances and the problems and kind of just like diagnosed those and said, all right, we'll resolve to do better. So this time we said, you know what, let's look at, see how we can better understand it from the other person's perspective, but also let's look at the root issue. Why does that bother me about you so much? Why am I so stuck on what I think is the way, right? And so we kind of had to go both big picture and then really examine the root of the issue a little bit more than we ever really had. Would you say?
Definitely. And I'd say the root of the issue when it comes to divisions and lack of unity, it comes down to pride. You know, one of my favorite authors is C.S. Lewis, who I'm sure a lot of you have read, but he has a quote in Mere Christianity where he says, humility is not thinking less of yourself, but simply thinking of yourself less. And if you want any relationship to work on a macro scale or micro scale, individual relationship, marriage, friendship, you need to be humble and you need to think of the other person before you think of yourself.
Yeah, like consider how true that really is, not only in marriage, right? I mean, you might not be married, but in all interpersonal relationships. And really, the reality is that our differences in understanding in one another or our perspective differences, those things coupled with pride and the desire to be right, that's what creates the me versus you mentality. It seems so basic, so simple, right? We've probably talked about pride a lot, but I think sometimes we can diagnose it in others so quickly before we see it in ourselves. And so that's what starts to create this me versus you, or on a broader scale, an us versus them mentality.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this past week, so like I said, we saw these issues, and we realized that we were just kind of like putting a Band-Aid on it. We were just talking about it. We were saying, oh, you know what, I'll be better, but we weren't saying how we were going to be better, or, you know.
Or making these like giant resolutions, like
right, and
changing our entire.
Kind of overextending, over-promising and under-delivering. So something my mom always told me, she's not the original person to say this, but failure to plan is planning to fail. And that's true in any sense, but especially when you're trying to become united.
Yeah. So like I said, this kind of us versus them mentality, that's the kind of mentality that leads to divisions in society too, whether that's racism, prejudice, any kind of division between people, not just within marriage. And so something struck me this week as we sat down to talk. We took a little bit of time to kind of like breathe and think through, why does this keep coming up? And we sat down, and he made a really interesting comment that I hadn't thought of. And he said, Jay, there's these recurring things that you're frustrated with me about and vice versa. And here's what I think I realized is every single time we've tried to resolve this before, I've just said these broad statements like, all right, I'll just start doing the laundry more, or whatever the resolution is. He said, we need to make more incremental adjustments, more practical action steps that we can slowly, progressively begin working more towards unity and softening our hearts and shaping the direction in which we go, because these giant statements really aren't working. So what we did is we had to sit down and really not only get to the root and try to understand each other's perspective, but then write down some clear action steps. We had to say, okay, what's one incremental change that I can make to start modifying my behaviors, but first by starting in the heart. So do you want to share one of the examples of what we wrote down?
Yeah,
we wrote them down and stuck them on our fridge.
Yeah, so literally it's like the last thing we see before we leave the house and the first thing we see when we come back. We're visual people, that's how it works. One of those things was we resolved to work out 3 to 4 days a week. Every morning. Wake up at 4:45, 5 a.m. Now,
I know that's super ambitious, but
Jordan's not exactly a morning person. But our schedules are very different. I work for a medical device company. She's self-employed. And so there are times where I'll end up working out in the afternoon. And in order to be unified, we resolved to do these things together.
And that doesn't mean we had to do everything together, but we thought, if we could start a few of our days every week, we know that's not realistic and there's going to have to be ways we bend, but if we could find something that we're stewarding our health, right? We're stewarding our spiritual health, our physical health, and actually resolving to get up and do it together and hold one another accountable to that, that's one way we're going to slowly start our days more unified, not just say, oh, okay, we'll do better.
Exactly.
Right? So what's the point? Why are we bringing this up? I mean, why does it matter? Well, the whole event or the whole theme of this week, from what we understand, is really focused on how we become the change, how we as the church really do create the change in culture, in society, and also how do we live out God's love? How do we show kindness and understanding to those who are different from us? What does that really look like? And if you think about this outside of marriage, I think sometimes we can see divisions in the world and these deep-rooted problems that are ultimately rooted in pride that come from a difference of understanding, right? That create that me versus you mentality. And those types of divisions in the world, we can look at them and go, okay, well, I'll just resolve to be a nice person. Or we can put these blanket statements, or I would never, or at least I don't, right? And we kind of start to make these broad, general brushstroke statements. But I think sometimes we don't actually take the necessary incremental steps to change those things, because I think we can see these big problems and think, I can't change that. Or I have to do these crazy big things, and I'm overcommitting myself. Or I just back away from it because it's too much. And so we kind of fail to take those small incremental action steps like we realized in our marriage we had been slowly kind of failing to take. And that's what allows those things to continue to exist.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for example, being on a football team, I had the privilege of getting to play with and develop friendship with guys from radically different backgrounds than I grew up with. Like, I grew up in Scottsdale, Arizona, which is like Whitey Whitesville. I had no idea how much I didn't know about the rest of the world around me, just by living with guys from different parts of the country, guys, black guys, Hispanic guys, Jewish, Muslim, like all of these guys were on a team. And you have, like, I'm sure the softball team here can attest. We've got a diverse group of ladies here.
Do you even know if that's the softball team, or are you just guessing? Oh, okay, good. Wow, you know your stuff, babe. He's an athlete, I'm not. It's fine.
So we have a diverse group of ladies here. Like, racism has no place on any team because you guys are united on one goal. You guys have a common objective. None of that matters. You love each other. And that's the bottom line.
Brotherhood.
Yeah, that brotherhood, that sisterhood, that's what pulls you together, and that's what allows you guys to have success. You look past your differences, your political differences, your cultural differences, because you're united on that common goal. Jesus didn't say tolerate one another. Jesus said love one another. And the way that you love one another is by putting another person's interest before your own.
Yeah, and we were talking about how you really can't have teamwork if you're just simply tolerating someone's existence. If we were just tolerating one another and not choosing love, we'd just be coexisting. We wouldn't be working towards a common goal, and we'd forget that we're on the same team. And so, bringing it full circle, just as differences that can so easily begin to divide us in a sacred relationship that we've vowed to be in, that we've chosen to be in, a marriage where you really are supposed to be on the same team, pride and hard-heartedness can rob us of our ability to really be the hands and feet of Jesus in our world, right? That's what really causes us to stiff-arm others we don't quite understand. And many of these perceived divisions, or literal divisions, are caused by a difference in perspective, right? Everyone's perspective is shaped by their experiences, their background, where they come from, all those things. So a lot of it is perception.
Yeah, so just wrapping it up here, I want to go back to the scripture that we read. Like the author says in verse 14, just as Jesus is our peace, he's the one who made two groups one. He destroyed the barrier, the dividing wall of hostility. We as the church, the body of Christ, need to be that peace, that calm in the storm in our culture when all of these terrible things that are a result of our fallen sin nature. We need to be that safe haven, that place where people can come and all of these things cease to exist. Sorry, I lost my spot.
You're doing great.
Thanks. So if you want to make changes on a macro level in society, it starts with you as an individual. You got to look in the mirror and examine your own heart. You got to say, where am I being prideful? Where am I assuming that just because I've done one thing one way my entire life, that it's automatically the right way? When was the last time that you invited someone over for dinner?
That's different than you.
Who's different than you?
And that's not speaking to moral relativism or anything, but it's just the choice to really take action. And I think that's really our whole point here is we had to learn this week in our marriage the importance of putting things into action that slowly begin to change our hearts, right? Yes, God changes our hearts. Yes, things can soften our hearts, but we also have a role to play. And I think sometimes we fail to take responsibility. And so we really just want to encourage you guys to take action. And that doesn't mean that you have to go save the world or head up the diversity department or get married tomorrow. But It means that you need to make those simple micro adjustments in your own heart, in your own daily life, in your daily actions and choices. Resolve to be curious, you guys. Ask questions more than you assume. I mean, he's better about this, but I make a lot of assumptions. I just assume that something he said was for whatever reason. Ask more questions than you assume. Try to go out on a limb and invite someone that's a little different from you to come share a meal with you and ask and learn and be willing to go that extra mile, even if they're difficult to understand. That's when we're going to start to really, on a micro level, make those macro changes in the world.
That's all we have for you guys. Thank you so much for having us.